I still remember the look on Daniel's face when he strutted into the living room that morning like he had just won the damn lottery because according to him, he had. A distant uncle from overseas left me a massive inheritance, he'd announced, practically glowing with pride, and the entire Carter family went into celebration mode like they were already sipping champagne in a Manhattan penthouse. His mother, Linda, even dropped to her knees and bowed 3 times to the heavens, dragging her husband Richard along to give thanks. I tried to be the sane one in the room, gently reminding them, please be careful, it could be a scam, but that only earned me dirty looks and accusations of being jealous of their good fortune. 2 days later, Mia Sullivan, his so-called white moonlight who had just returned from her 5-year stint studying abroad, waltzed into our home dragging her designer luggage like she owned the place. I hadn't even gotten a chance to ask what the hell she was doing here when Daniel coldly pulled a divorce agreement from his drawer, slid it across the dining table, and said, sign it. Let's part ways peacefully. Peacefully? He really had the audacity. I stared at the papers, then at Mia who stood beside him playing the perfect victim, and for a moment, my brain just froze. Linda looked at me with that fake smile of hers and said, Claire, don't take this the wrong way, but with your background, it was a blessing you even married into our family. Now that Daniel is headed to the US to chase bigger dreams, don't hold him back. I couldn't even be angry. I just laughed bitterly and repeated her words, holding him back. Because when Daniel graduated and couldn't land a single job interview, who bought him his first suit with the last of my mom's savings? Who printed dozens of resumes and followed him around half the city for job fairs? Oh right, that was me. Vanessa, my sister-in-law who once clung to me like I was her role model, now crossed her arms and sneered. She's right. Claire, look in the mirror. You're not worthy of my brother's success. I looked at her, remembering how 3 years ago, she cried in my arms when she couldn't afford tuition for her study abroad dream, and I pawned every piece of jewelry my mother left me to give her that 100,000 yuan. You're the best sister-in-law I could ask for, she'd sobbed back then. What a joke. Even Richard chimed in, not even bothering to look up from his newspaper. Claire, we've treated you well these years. Now that Daniel has a big future ahead, help him move on. It's the right thing to do. I remember when he had a heart attack last year, and the surgery deposit was 200,000. Daniel was off on a business trip, unreachable, and I ran to 3 banks in one night, eventually mortgaging the only small house in my name just to save his life. He called me the benefactor of the Carter family. Now, that same benefactor didn't even deserve a glance from Daniel, who was busy texting someone with his head down. Daniel, I said, my voice shaking, but when he finally looked up, there wasn't a shred of guilt in his eyes. It's settled, he said flatly. You sign, and we go our separate ways. I remember on our wedding night, he'd held my hand and whispered, Claire, meeting you was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. I remember sitting up with him all night when he was sick, his voice weak but sure. As long as you're by my side, I can handle anything. Every birthday, every anniversary, he'd bring me small but thoughtful gifts that showed he actually paid attention to what I liked. And now, all those sweet moments sounded like scripted lines from a bad drama. Then Mia piped up with that smug tone of hers. Oh, by the way, Claire, I heard from Daniel that the old house is still under your name. Since you're divorcing, don't you think it's time you transfer it to him? I mean, he's lived there all these years, right? That house me mom's only legacy to me. Not some fancy villa, but in a great neighborhood, and worth at least 3 million now. Before I could say a word, Linda chimed in. That's a good point. Claire, you're a woman, you don't need such a big house. Give it to Daniel. Think of it as your last act of kindness to this family. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Was this real life? Over the years, I treated them like my own blood. I gave up everything I had without complaint. But the second they decided I wasn't useful anymore, they not only wanted to kick me out, but also rob me of the last thing my mother left me. Sorry, I said, my voice suddenly calm and cold. That house has nothing to do with your family. It's staying with me. Daniel finally looked up, frowning. Claire, what's that supposed to mean? We're husband and wife. Why are you being so stingy? Stingy? I stared at the man I once loved so deeply and wondered how I ever thought he was worth it. You want to talk about being stingy? Daniel, do you even remember everything I've done for you and your family? Vanessa rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. All you did was cook and clean like a glorified maid. That's what wives do, right? I wanted to scream. Every morning, I woke up at 5 to make breakfast for the entire family. I cleaned until my back hurt, and I haven't bought myself anything nice in years just so we could save more. And Mia had the nerve to add, don't act like a saint. You married him because you thought he had potential. Now that he's successful, you're bitter. I was literally trembling with rage. How did this family twist the truth so easily? That's enough, I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. Your family has really opened my eyes today. The room went dead silent. For the first time, they all looked at Mirel. I looked. I saw confusion, maybe a flicker of shame, but mostly irritation. And in that moment, I realized I didn't need to prove anything to them. They had no conscience, no gratitude, and no soul. I've signed the divorce agreement, I said, grabbing my purse. We're done. I walked to the door, heels echoing like gunshots across the tile, and added without turning back, and forget about the house, didn't even think about it. Claire, Daniel shouted after me, don't be so heartless. I paused, just for a beat. Daniel, I said coolly, you were the heartless one, not me. As I stepped out into the night, I heard Mia say behind me, ugh, look at her attitude. We should have divorced her a long time ago. But I didn't care anymore. Let them rot in their delusions. I was finally free. After I left the Carter house that night, I went back to the small apartment my mom left me, the one they were so eager to snatch from me. The moment I stepped through the door, the scent of old wood, lavender detergent, and faint traces of her favorite jasmine perfume wrapped around me like a protective shield. Everything was still the way she had kept it, warm, home. I collapsed on the couch, shoes still on, and stared at the ceiling with a blank mind and an aching chest. 10 years of marriage, just discarded like yesterday's trash. 10 years of youth, of sacrifice, of loyalty tossed away the second Daniel thought he could upgrade his life with some overseas fantasy and a fake angel in heels. My phone buzzed, dragging me out of the silence. It was Emma, my best friend since high school, and her timing couldn't have been more precise. Claire, there's a class reunion tomorrow night. You coming? I almost replied no out of instinct, but then I caught my reflection in the mirror and realized why not. I had nothing left to lose, and maybe seeing some old faces would help me breathe again. So the next evening, I put on a modest but flattering dress, curled my hair just a little, and applied just enough makeup to look like I hadn't cried for 3 days straight. When I walked into the private room at the venue, I wasn't expecting to see Daniel sitting at the main table like he owned the place, with Mia glued to his side like a designer handbag. Their posture screamed smug couple energy, and the way everyone around them fawned made me sick to my stomach. I was about to turn and walk out when Emma caught my arm and smiled. Claire, sit next to me. I saved you a seat. I forced a smile and nodded, pretending not to notice how the entire room quieted for a second when people saw me. Of course, they'd be curious the freshly divorced woman showing up solo while her ex and his homewrecker acted like the prom king and queen. Sarah, one of our former classmates, leaned forward and asked, Claire, where's Daniel? Didn't you two always come together? Before I could even form a response, Daniel chuckled from across the room and said casually, we're divorced.
Boom. Instant silence.
You could hear a pin drop. Then came the gasps and whispers. Divorced? No way. Weren't they super close? And then, right on cue, Mia leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder and cooed, it's my fault. I made things awkward for him. But the truth is we really love each other. I waited 5 years abroad for this.
Ugh.
I clenched my fists under the table, nails digging into my palm. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was screaming. Emma gave me a sympathetic glance, but I waved it off. Then, as if the evening couldn't get worse, Kevin raised his glass and toasted, To Daniel, for finding true love. The crowd followed suit like sheep, toasting their glasses like they were celebrating a royal engagement. Mia, the master of fake modesty, turned to me and said, "Claire, I'm genuinely grateful to you for taking care of Daniel all these years. If it weren't for your support, he wouldn't be where he is today." My lips curled into a cold smile. "You're right. I did take good care of him. You're lucky." Daniel picked up his wine and smirked. "Claire, you've seen so much of the world with me, been through everything. You'll find a good, stable man to settle down with. It won't be a loss." Chuckles echoed around the room, every laugh a knife in my back. "That's right," Sarah added cheerfully. "Women just need a man who loves them, even if he isn't rich." Their fake comfort made me want to flip the table. I was just about to stand up and leave when Ryan, another old classmate, leaned in with curiosity gleaming in his eyes. "Daniel, we heard you inherited some big money from a rich uncle in the States. Is that true?" Daniel's chest puffed with pride.
Yep.
"My uncle made a fortune in America and left me a large inheritance. Let's just say it's more than enough to buy a house in New York, launch a company, and enjoy life." "Wow," someone whispered. "How much exactly?" "Let's not get into numbers," Daniel said with a mysterious grin. "But we already picked out a villa in Long Island, 20 million. Mia's eyes sparkled like she was living her American dream already. "It has a pool, a tennis court, and a garden the size of a football field." Everyone gasped and oot like they were watching an influencer unbox luxury bags. I rolled my eyes and took a sip of wine, trying to keep calm. I'd read too many scam cases lately. It was all sounding way too familiar. Same plot. A mysterious overseas inheritance, a lawyer who needs you to cover a few fees up front, big promises, zero delivery. I glanced over at Daniel and couldn't help but feel a twisted mix of pity and satisfaction. He was too arrogant to even question it. Then he shoved his phone in my face, showing me pictures of some lavish villa with chandeliers and a marble driveway. "Claire, take a look. This is where Mia and I will be living. Envious?" "It's gorgeous," I said with a straight face, not blinking once. Mia grabbed his arm again. "After we move in, we'll open an investment firm. Daniel says we'll be pulling in millions a year." The room was bursting with exclamations and congratulations, but I sat there quietly, thinking, just wait. "You'll see." I was reaching for my glass again when the doors burst open. In walked 3 uniformed police officers, serious and sharp, and the room fell into stunned silence. "Who's Daniel Carter?" one of them asked. Daniel stood up slowly, confused but trying to look important. "That's me." "Is something wrong?" The officer stepped forward. "We received a report about potential involvement in an overseas telecom fraud. Please come with us for questioning." You could hear jaws hitting the floor. Mia clutched Daniel's arm, her face ghost white. "Fraud? What do you mean fraud?" "This is a mistake, right?" Daniel stuttered. "I didn't scam anyone. They were my relatives. They had documents and everything, lawyer letters, inheritance papers." The officer flipped open a notebook. "Did they ask you to pay any fees in advance? Inheritance tax? Legal processing fees?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded weakly. The officer's voice grew colder. "Sir, this is a classic scam known as the pig butchering scheme. The documents are forged. The law firm doesn't exist. The property photos you received were stolen from real estate listings." The murmurs started immediately. "Oh my God, he was scammed. All that bragging for nothing." Mia looked like she might pass out. No, this can't be happening." Just then, the doors opened again and Linda, Richard, and Vanessa came rushing in, panic written all over their faces. "Daniel!" Linda shrieked. "Something's wrong. That villa seller just called again. They want more money to upgrade us to the presidential villa section, same neighborhood as the President of the United States." "Are you serious?" Vanessa gasped, half excited, half delusional. But Richard's face was grim. "We already gave them everything, mortgaged all our houses, took out loans. We don't have another dime left." The officers exchanged glances, their expressions darkening. Mr. Carter, how much money did you wire to these individuals? Daniel looked like he was going to be sick. 3.8 million.
What? Mia screamed.
Where did that even come from? I mortgaged everything, he muttered, barely audible. The room exploded again. I just sat there watching it all unfold like a front-row guest at a play I didn't audition for. I'd already filed a tip with the fraud division earlier, knowing something didn't smell right. Turns out, I was right on the money. The entire room fell into stunned silence, like the air had been sucked out and replaced with static, as if everyone's champagne-soaked fantasy just shattered in real time, and I couldn't help but think what a show, and I got front-row seats. When Daniel muttered the number, 3.8 million, it echoed like a bomb. Mia looked like her soul left her body. Her hands trembled as she grabbed Daniel's sleeve and hissed, "Where the hell did you get that kind of money?" His lips moved, but no sound came out until he finally whispered, "I mortgaged all of our properties. Every single one." Linda gasped like someone had punched her in the chest, while Richard dropped into the nearest chair, his face paler than the tablecloth. "You did what?" she screeched, lunging forward. "Are you saying you mortgaged our family home without asking us?" The police officer who had been calmly observing finally stepped in with a frown. "Mr. Carter, mortgaging property without consent from the legal co-owners is a serious offense. You'll need to explain the details to us at the station." Mia's voice rose a full octave, her composure completely gone. "This is a joke, right? You didn't actually send them all that money, did you? There were receipts, law firm stamps, certificates." The lead officer remained firm. "All forged. Scammers use real logos and fake identities to appear legitimate. We've seen this many times." Daniel tried to argue, clinging to his delusions like a life vest. No. They showed me proof. They said I'd inherit over 20 million. They even had a property picked out. They had a video call with me. The officer nodded slowly, like he was used to this script. "Yes, they used deepfakes or paid actors. Mr. Carter, your entire family was targeted in what we classify as a large-scale inheritance fraud scheme." The room rippled with gasps and whispers. I could feel the shift happening seconds ago. Daniel was a man with a golden future. Now he was the punchline to a very expensive joke. One of the classmates leaned over and murmured, "You think he really sent all of it?" Another whispered, "How long will it take to pay that back?" "Decades." Meanwhile, Linda started to hyperventilate and cry, hands gripping her designer purse like it was her last possession. "Our house. Our retirement. Everything's gone," she sobbed. Vanessa was pacing in circles, muttering no, like a broken record, her perfectly straight hair now a frizzy mess. Mia, still trying to salvage her fantasy, took a shaky step back from Daniel. "You told me we were rich," she said through clenched teeth. "You said we were moving to New York. You promised me a villa. You promised me a company." "I thought we were," Daniel replied weakly, sweat pouring down his forehead. "I believed them." "You believed a scam?" she screamed, smacking his shoulder. "You didn't even verify it?" The officer held up a hand to separate them, but honestly, I was just sitting there sipping my wine like I was at a theater. I'd been silent so far, but I knew everyone was waiting for me to gloat, to throw it in his face, to say, "Told you so." And, oh, how badly I wanted to. But I didn't need to. The shame on Daniel's face did all the talking. Then, like it couldn't get any more dramatic, the doors opened again, this time not with police, but with men in black suits and sunglasses, the kind you only ever see in loan shark stories or late-night crime dramas. One of them, tall with an angular jaw and a voice like gravel, stepped in and said, "Daniel Carter?" Daniel visibly shrank. "Yes. We're from Atlantic Microloan Agency. You're 2 weeks overdue. With interest, you now owe us 5 million. If you don't repay it within 3 days, you'll regret it." Mia gasped, her knees buckling as she collapsed into a chair. Linda froze mid-sob. Richard stood up shakily. "Wait, that's impossible. It was 3.8. Interest accrues," the man said coldly. "Quickly. The group turned and left as suddenly as they came, leaving only chaos and stunned faces in their wake. Emma leaned in and whispered to me, "You knew, didn't you?" I nodded slightly, my expression neutral. The moment he said inheritance and uncle from abroad, I knew it was a scam. I even warned them. "Then why didn't they listen?" she asked, still stunned. Because in their heads, I was always the bitter ex-wife who couldn't stand to see them win, I said, calmly placing my glass back on the table. Suddenly, all eyes turned to me when Daniel blurted out, "It was you, wasn't it? You called the cops." I didn't flinch. I met his eyes and replied, "Yes. I reported it before anyone got hurt. It's what any responsible citizen would do." "You just wanted to humiliate us," he yelled, rage finally overtaking his embarrassment. "You're my wife, how could you do this?" "Ex-wife," I corrected him. "And when you threw those divorce papers in my face, you didn't care about that title." Mia snapped at me too. "You're just a jealous, vindictive witch. You couldn't stand that Daniel chose me." I laughed, not bitterly, not angrily, but genuinely. Jealous? Of what? The fake villa? The non-existent millions? The lawsuits and debt collectors waiting outside? Her face twisted into rage and shame, but she had nothing left to say. Even the classmates who were cheering for them minutes ago now avoided eye contact. Some looked sympathetic, others amused, but most just looked relieved it wasn't them. "She's lying," Daniel shouted at the officers. "She filed a false report out of revenge." "Mr. Carter," one of the officers replied sternly, "we've verified all the facts. The report was accurate, and you're the one who fell for the scam. This is not a false report. It's a confirmed case of international fraud." "Let's go," another officer said, stepping forward. "We'll need all of you to come to the station for questioning and to start the formal investigation process." One by one, the Carters stood up. Linda cried harder, clutching her handbag like it held the last of her dignity. Richard didn't speak a word. Vanessa looked ready to faint. And Mia, bless her, tried to slink away quietly until the officer said, "You too, miss. We need your statement." "I didn't do anything," she snapped. "I didn't even know." "And yet you benefited," the officer replied without emotion. "You'll have your chance to explain." As they were escorted out, Linda turned one last time to look at me. "You jinx. This is all your fault." "No," I said softly. "This is all yours." And with that, I watched them leave broken, humiliated, and unraveling. The room stayed awkwardly silent for a moment before people slowly returned to their seats, their whispers muted now, unsure of how to react to the real-life train wreck they had just witnessed. Ryan gave me a look that was part awe, part fear. "Claire, you're not even a little heartbroken?" I stood up, adjusted my dress, and replied, "No, because for the first time in 10 years, I feel free." Emma followed me out and grabbed my hand gently. "Are you okay?" I smiled at her, really smiled, the kind I hadn't worn in years. "Emma, I've never been better." The night air hit me like a wave of freedom, crisp and clean, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost of myself. I felt like a survivor. I felt like the main character. 3 days after the chaos at the reunion, I was at home sorting through a dusty old box of photographs my mom had left me, each one a reminder of a time when life felt safe, stable, and real, and for once I didn't feel like crying. I felt peaceful, whole, like someone finally stepping into the light after years of living in someone else's shadow. And just when I thought I could start healing, the doorbell rang, and I froze, something in my gut already warning me before I even checked the peephole. And sure enough, there they were, Daniel and his entire family standing at my doorstep, faces haggard, eyes red, clothes wrinkled like they hadn't slept in days. And in that moment, I felt a surreal calmness wash over me. Like I'd been expecting this and I already knew exactly how it would go. So I opened the door just wide enough to look Daniel in the eyes and said flatly, "What do you want?" He stepped forward with his voice hoarse and trembling. "Claire, please save us." And I almost laughed right there because the same man who told me to sign the divorce papers and get out of his life now stood at my door, eyes bloodshot, beard scruffy, and no trace of the smugness that used to make me sick, and right behind him was Linda, her usually perfect hair now gray and unkempt, mascara smudged like she'd been crying for days. Richard hunched and silent like a man who'd lost everything. And Vanessa, the once arrogant little sister-in-law who now looked like a ghost with tears running down her face, and they all started pleading, talking over one another like they were drowning. "Claire, please help us. The loan company's calling every hour. They're threatening us. We'll lose everything." And I stood there unmoved, leaning casually against the doorframe, arms crossed, voice cold as ice when I said, "Help you? Why would I do that?" Daniel stepped closer, desperate now. Because we were married, we were family, I made a mistake, I see it now, and I raised a brow. "You want me to just watch you fall apart?"
Why not?
"You watched me do it." He flinched. Linda suddenly dropped to her knees, right there on my doorstep, not even caring about her dignity anymore. "Claire, we know we were wrong. Please, you're a good person. You always work it. You just forgive us this once." And her voice cracked with genuine panic, but it didn't move me. Not anymore, not after everything. Not after she said I was unworthy of her son, that I should just serve him and step aside. Not after she called me a jinx in front of a room full of people, and Richard followed, kneeling beside her. "Claire, we're sorry, we really are, we should have treated you better." And I just tilted my head and said, "You remember saying blood is thicker than water?" Newsflash. I'm not your blood. And that was when things got worse, because suddenly I heard footsteps pounding up the stairwell, fast and heavy, and then 5 men in black suits burst into view, looking like they came straight out of a crime movie, and the one leading them, wearing sunglasses indoors and a permanent scowl, pointed at Daniel and said, "You've been dodging us for weeks. Time's up," and Daniel stumbled back, panicked. "I wasn't hiding. 2 came here to get help. I'll find the money, I promise." And the guy sneered, "You owe $5 million now with interest. You've got 3 days, or we start collecting." $5 million. Vanessa screamed, her voice cracking. It was 3.8. How did it become 5? And the man didn't even blink. Ever heard of compound interest? And just like that, they turned and walked away, leaving behind only shattered pride and a broken family slumped in my hallway. And when the echoes of their boots disappeared, Daniel looked at me again, eyes wild. "Claire, please, your house. It's worth at least $3 million, right? Sell it. Help us. Please, we can make it through this." And I stepped back like he'd tried to touch fire to my skin. "Are you insane?" "Claire," Vanessa crawled forward, grabbing my ankle. "Just sell it, and we'll find a way to cover the rest. If you don't, they'll kill us." And I stared down at her hand like it was a snake, then shook her off, voice sharp. "You really think I'd sell the only thing my mother left me? For you?" And Linda chimed in from the floor, "Because we're family." And that's when I completely lost it. Family? You mean the same people who told me I was a burden? Who humiliated me and pushed me out like trash? Who asked me to sign and make room? Daniel, do you remember when your dad needed surgery and you were off on some trip and unreachable? I mortgaged this house to save his life. And Richard, you called me your benefactor, said you'd never forget what I did. Guess you forgot.
And Vanessa?
You cried in my arms when you couldn't afford tuition, and I pawned my mother's jewelry for you. You called me the best sister-in-law in the world. But the second Daniel got rich, I became disposable. Do you all remember that? Because I do. None of them spoke, their faces twisted in shame. But I wasn't done. Daniel, when you had no job, I bought you your first suit and walked half the city handing out resumes with you. You called me your lucky star. And now what? I'm supposed to sacrifice again, so you can dig yourselves out of a mess you created. Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came. Then, out of nowhere, Linda pointed at Mia, who had been hiding behind the staircase the whole time. "It's her fault. That vixen came back and seduced my son. She's the reason we're in this mess." Mia's eyes went wide. "Excuse me? I didn't seduce anyone. Daniel chased me. He said he wanted to give me a better life. I didn't ask him to mortgage anything. Don't lie." Vanessa turned on her like a rabid dog. "If you hadn't come back, my brother would still have a wife, a house, and his dignity. You can't blame me for your stupidity. Mia snapped. He's the one who believed the scam. Enough, Daniel shouted. This isn't helping, but none of them listened. The three of them shouting over each other, pointing fingers, blaming, spiraling like a whirlpool of broken dreams. And then it happened. I don't know who pushed who, but Mia suddenly stumbled backward, arms flailing, and then she missed a step and screamed as she tumbled down the stairwell, the sound of her body hitting concrete echoing through the building like a gunshot, followed by a voice from downstairs. Someone calling, ambulance, and everything froze, their shouting turning into silence. Horror painted across every face as they ran down to her, and I just closed the door. The sound of the latch locking them out forever, like a full circle ending I didn't plan but definitely welcomed. And for a long moment, I stood there, breathing slowly. The hallway now quiet again, like a storm had passed and left only debris behind. And though I heard the sirens arriving, the chaos unfolding downstairs, the voices. Panicking, I didn't go out, I didn't peek, I didn't care, because this wasn't my storm, Anna Marie, it was theirs. And I was done saving people who never once thought to save me. That night, as the ambulance wailed downstairs and the Carter family was surrounded by cops and medics and neighbors whispering behind drawn curtains, I was already inside my apartment, packing my suitcase with the calm precision of a woman who knew exactly what she needed and what she was leaving behind. And for once, that suitcase didn't feel like an escape badge, it felt like a declaration of freedom, a passport to the life I should have chosen years ago, because if staying meant being tangled in their mess, then leaving was the only way to live, and I booked the next available flight out of the country, not even caring where it went as long as it flew far away from Daniel Carter, his drama, his debts, and every cruel word I ever had to swallow while smiling through gritted teeth for a family that only saw me as a tool. And when I walked through the airport security gate with my phone in airplane mode and my passport clutched tight in hand, I swear I felt 10 years of dead weight lift off my shoulders, like I'd been buried alive and finally dug myself out. And I didn't look back, not once, not even when the gate closed behind me, because for the first time in forever, I was thinking about my future, not theirs, not his, not anyone else's, just mine, what I wanted, where I wanted to go, who I wanted to be, and it was terrifying and thrilling and so overdue. But freedom has a funny way of feeling both empty and infinite, like standing on the edge of a cliff with the wind pushing at your back, and as the planes soared into the clouds, I watched the city lights disappear beneath me and told myself that I wasn't running, I was reclaiming, and the next few days abroad were honestly a blur of quiet cafes, long walks along unfamiliar streets, and falling asleep without crying for the first time in years. But the peace didn't last long, because even oceans away, gossip travels faster than light. And when I turned my phone back on, messages flooded in from mutual acquaintances, former classmates, and even Emma, all saying one thing. The Carters were finished, not just financially, but socially, legally, and emotionally destroyed, because Mia had survived the fall but broke both her legs and was now suing the Carter family for medical costs and emotional distress, demanding $2 million in damages, and since none of them had the money or assets left to cover it, her lawsuit was pushing them straight into bankruptcy court. And if that wasn't enough, the loan sharks had started circling harder than ever, showing up at their doorstep, calling their neighbors, threatening everything from repossession to physical harm, and while Daniel tried to plead with Mia for leniency, she turned on him completely, blaming him for everything and refusing to back down, claiming he had misled her, lied to her, and destroyed her life. And it would have been almost funny if it weren't so tragic watching the woman he threw his marriage away for become the very person trying to bury him alive. But poetic justice has no mercy, and the worst was still to come, because the police finally finished their investigation and declared the Carter family as an official case study in international fraud victimization, plastering their story across news outlets and social media as a nationwide warning. And the headlines were brutal: man mortgages family homes for fake inheritance. Greed leads to ruin. A tragic cautionary tale. From millionaire dreams to courtroom nightmares. And there were photos, too, of Linda crying outside a courtroom, of Daniel in handcuffs, of Vanessa screaming at reporters to leave them alone, and part of me wanted to feel sorry for them. I really did, but I couldn't forget how they looked at me that day at the dinner table, like I was nothing, disposable, a step stool they'd outgrown. And now they were choking on the very greed that made them kick me out. And apparently, their financial situation had gotten so bad they couldn't even pay their electricity bill, and they were living in the same house Daniel had mortgaged behind their backs, which was now under foreclosure. And then came the news that stunned even me, trapped between the lawsuits, the loan interests, the medical bills, and their own disgrace. The Carter family had quietly burned charcoal in the sealed-off bedroom of that house, committing group suicide in a desperate, shameful ending. And I sat there in my hotel room, staring at the screen, fingers trembling, breath caught in my chest, trying to make sense of the fact that people I had once called family were now gone, not gone as in moved away or ruined, but truly, finally, permanently gone. And it hit me with a strange kind of grief, not sadness exactly, but a cold emptiness that whispered, "This could have been you." Because if I had stayed, if I had handed over the deed to my house, if I had sacrificed just one more time, I would have been dragged into that spiral and never come back up. And I think that's when I truly realized the weight of everything I'd endured, that I hadn't just escaped a toxic relationship, I had escaped death, and that truth lodged itself deep in my bones, never letting me forget how close I came to destruction just because I was too loyal, too kind, too hopeful. And now I sat alone in a strange country, breathing clean air and watching sunsets that didn't belong to anyone but me. And I didn't cry for them, not because I didn't have emotions, but because they'd never once cried for me. Not when I gave, not when I begged, not when I left, and the world kept turning. The headlines eventually faded, but their story stayed as a burned-in cautionary tale, shared in fraud prevention seminars, discussed in legal panels, used by journalists and police alike as a lesson in how pride, greed, and betrayal always cost more than you think. And sometimes I still get messages, "Claire, are you okay? Did you hear? Was it really that bad?" And I never reply, because what could I possibly say that would explain everything I lost, everything I survived, and everything I refused to give up, including myself. And now, when I walk past people who remind me of the Carters, entitled, smug, pretending to be something they're noti, just smile, because I know how it ends. And no amount of status or sweet-talking or fake riches can save someone who chooses delusion over decency. And as I sip my coffee in a little corner cafe in a city I never thought I'd visit, I look out the window and realize I don't miss them, I don't hate them, and I don't regret any of it, because even though they called me a jinx, I turned out to be the only one who knew how to survive the storm. It's been months since I left, and if you asked me now who I was back then, the woman who stood frozen as her husband slapped divorce papers on the table and called it love, I wouldn't recognize her, because that version of me was built entirely out of sacrifice, molded to fit a family that never saw me as anything more than a placeholder, a warm body to cook their meals, pay their debts, and hold their egos together. And I'll be honest, there are still nights when I wake up in a cold sweat, momentarily trapped in the memory of Daniel's smirk or Linda's smug voice telling me I wasn't good enough. But then I look around at where I am now, clean sheets, quiet streets, sunlight through my own windows, and I breathe. And it's different now, because this piece is mine. This space is mine, and nobody can take it from me. Not with paperwork, not with guilt, not with a family name that once made me feel small. And even though I never got the kind of closure people write poems about, I got something better. I got my life back, and that's worth more than any apology they were never going to give. And I found out later, through one of Emma's teary voice notes, that the Carter family's death shook the entire community, not just because of the shock factor, but because of how quickly they fell from grace. And the authorities used their story in every fraud prevention campaign for months, putting their names on posters and pamphlets like they were cautionary characters in a financial horror story. And I didn't cry when I saw Daniel's face on one of those leaflets at the airport. I just shook my head and kept walking, because when someone you once loved becomes a headline, your grief turns into something else, something sharper, like the final chapter of a book you were never meant to finish, but somehow had to survive. And believe it or not, life kept moving like it always does, and eventually so did I, slowly, like a woman learning how to walk again after being paralyzed by someone else's expectations. And I started small, teaching myself to enjoy meals alone, taking pictures of sunsets I didn't have to explain to anyone, spending money on things that brought me joy instead of guilt, and I even started journaling, writing down the things I'd never said out loud, like how deeply I hated how they made me feel invisible, how I used to pretend I was happy just to keep the peace, how I sometimes still hear Linda's voice in my head when I make a mistake, telling me I'm not enough, but every time I write it down, it loses its power, and one day, I looked at my reflection and didn't flinch, didn't analyze my weight, my clothes, my scars. I just looked and saw someone I liked, someone I respected, someone I fought hard to become, and I know some people still whisper about me, like I'm the villain in a story. They only half understand, but I don't correct them, I don't defend myself, because I've learned that peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from no longer needing to be. And Emma came to visit a few weeks ago, flew all the way out just to hug me and say, "Claire, I am so proud of you." And we drank wine on my tiny balcony, watching the city lights blink like stars, and she told me I was brave. But I didn't feel brave. I felt tired, honest, reborn, and she asked if I ever thought about dating again, and I laughed, not because the idea was ridiculous, but because for the first time in a decade, I didn't feel like I needed someone else to make my life whole, and maybe love will find me again, maybe it won't, but either way, I'll never settle again, never trade my sanity for someone's potential, never shrink just to be loved in return, and I told Emma that if I ever wrote my story, I'd call it The Jinx Who Learned to Thrive, because that's what they called me when everything went wrong, like I was the reason their empire crumbled, like I hadn't warned them, hadn't given them everything, hadn't stayed loyal until the end, but the truth is, I wasn't the curse, I was the mirror, the truth they didn't want to face, and they blamed me because it was easier than admitting they broke themselves. And now when I walk past couples arguing in restaurants or see women crying in cars parked outside grocery stores, I want to reach through the glass and tell them, you don't owe anyone your silence, because I stayed silent for so long, thinking it was noble, thinking it would earn me love, and all it did was drain me, erase me, reduce me to a role I never signed up for. And the thing about hitting rock bottom is that you stop fearing it, you'll learn to build from it, brick by brick, until you've crafted a life so stable, so yours, nobody can shake it, not even ghosts from your past. And every so often I still get messages from people who used to be friends with the Carter's casual texts like, "Hey, just checking in," or "Crazy times, huh?" And I never reply, not out of spite, but because I no longer belong to that world, the one where my worth was measured by how much I endured. And I know some people will think my story ended too dark, that maybe I should have forgiven more, been softer, less harsh, but what they don't understand is I already did that for years and it nearly killed me. And now, when I hear the word forgiveness, I don't picture letting others off the hook, I picture letting go of the need to carry them, of the weight they left on my shoulders. And that is enough, and maybe someday someone will read this and see themselves in my story, see their own pain reflected in mine, and maybe they'll find the courage to walk away, to sign the papers, to say no when it matters most, because if my story means anything, it's this. Don't wait for the people who hurt you to realize your value, realize it yourself. Claim it like it's the last thing keeping you alive, and never hand it over again. And as I sit here now, in a cozy apartment that smells like fresh coffee and quiet mornings, I finally understand what peace feels like, not the fake kind where you smile through gritted teeth to avoid a fight, but the real kind, where your heart doesn't flinch at footsteps, where your name doesn't sound like a warning, where your reflection smiles back and says, "We made it." And no matter what happens next, no matter where I go from here, I know I'll be okay, not because life is perfect, but because I've finally stopped pretending it has to be.